After the release of Budokai Tenkaichi, fans were left to speculate what would come next to follow up this monumental title. And the answer we got was the release of perhaps the most underrated Dragon Ball game of all time, Budokai Tenkaichi 2. Now, I'll be the first to admit, while I didn't dislike the original Budokai Tenkaichi, I was a bit skeptical on whether this sequel would deliver on all of its promises. I mean, 129 characters covering the entirety of the DBZ and GT storyline? That feat seemed a bit far-fetched, even to me as a kid. Reason being, while the original Tenkaichi did expand the core roster and also brought in some new characters that we hadn't seen in the original Budokai trilogy, aside from appearance, the differences in gameplay between each of the characters was few and far between, especially for the transformations. However, once I finally started my playthrough of this underrated entry, for the first time in nearly 2 decades, mind you, I realized just how overlooked this game was in comparison to its slightly younger brother, Budokai Tenkaichi 3. And where better to begin what might become one of my favorite retrospectives of all time than story mode, Dragon Adventure. From as early as the first hour of my playthrough, I realized that this very well may be the most thorough rendition of Dragon Ball Z story that I've ever played, at least as far as the battle aspects go. The improvements here are monumental, to say the least. The sagas themselves take hours to get through, jam-packed with a plethora of content. Literally, every fight imaginable is included here. I'm not kidding. If Goku fights an enemy in the anime, then let's say he goes Super Saiyan halfway through the battle, as he's prone to do, well, that's another fight against the same exact enemy that you just fought. Vegeta fights a villain, and then the next battle, Vegeta slightly changes locations and fights the exact same villain again. That's 2 fights in a row fighting the same exact dude with the same exact form. I just know the devs took their time rewatching this entire series, and every new fight that occurred, no matter how insignificant or small, they were like, okay, that's a battle. Write that shit down. Another great inclusion in this game's story mode is the ability to fly freely across the continental Dragon Ball world, taking Dragon Adventure to new heights, literally. Taking notes from Budokai 3, Tenkaichi 2 allows the player to not only fly from battle to battle, giving you an even more thorough experience of the story, but also gives you the option to stop at other iconic locations along the way. And while Budokai 3 did have this implementation in that story mode, you were still unable to actually roam around these locations once landing. Instead, simply delivering a quick text-based dialogue or granting you an item real quick. However, in this entry, albeit not very far, we were able to explore these areas and interact with the cast that was found there at our leisure. During your visit, you may also come across Z items, money, Dragon Balls, and even enemies to spar with, further increasing your character's level and preparing you for the next main event. And some of these stages, well, you may actually need to prepare yourself for, because Tenkaichi 2 can actually get pretty difficult. And while this game does offer you the choice between different difficulties, at least for the story mode, even the normal difficulty is a quite daunting task at times, which is where the level system I mentioned comes into play. In RPG fashion, you're able to level up each respective character by completing battles, again drawing even more similarities to Budokai 3. You're also going to want to take advantage of the Z items that you come across, because they will not only grant you additional stat boosts like higher health, attack, and defense, but also increase your character's level based on the item utilized. Equipping these, along with other skill-based Z items, will make upcoming challenges a bit more manageable, especially when it comes to one of the 3 special battles in the game, which happen to be just another reason why I fucking love Budokai Tenkaichi 2. You'll notice that most fights will require you to win the battle, regardless if the character actually won that fight in the anime. But in these 3 special scenarios I mentioned, including a fight against Raditz, Dodoria, and Adult Gohan, you are not required to win. Initially, I had no idea that winning these battles would actually unlock secret scenarios, but still, you knew damn well I was not about to let Dodoria get the best of me. However, Dodoria and the other 2 did many fucking times. These bouts are tough, rightfully so, which drew my suspicion even more so on what the drastic change in difficulty was for. Anyway, completing these battles unlocks complete and quite lengthy what-if scenarios, including a story where Raditz loses his memory and becomes a good guy. For a brief period. Zarbon attempting to overthrow Frieza and his goons and obtain eternal beauty, which was probably Bro's headcanon the entire time. And also a complete reimagining of the Majin Buu saga, which honestly has way too many Goku vs Vegeta fights, which unfortunately brings me to some of my dislikes of Tenkaichi 2. Yes, there are some bad things. Don't get me wrong, while it is awesome that we get such an in-depth rendition of the Z story and GT and the movies, sometimes it gets to be a bit too much. For instance, first Goku fights Vegeta in the tournament. Okay, bet. Now we're moving locations to repeat the exact same fight, or even better, Goku versus Janemba in base, fully capable of turning Super Saiyan 3 mid-battle. But still, we have to fight the same version of Janemba, but this time starting as Super Saiyan 3. Even the movies, What If stories, and GT are covered in such excruciating detail, and for the stages, I mean, they are vastly improved upon here, at least in comparison to the previous game. Not only are we treated to a much better variety of, and some great looking stages at that, but fighting mid-air, on ground, and even underwater looks so much better. And the Dragon Balls found these stages also give you more rewards than just characters, such as skills that are super useful, stat boosts, and items you can sell for high prices to get the same stat boosts. I mean, at least pretty much. However, while these stages are vastly improved, let's not forget this is the section where we're talking shit. And let me tell you, they leave out some key stages here, at least in terms of the story that they're attempting to cover. In the Fusion Reborn storyline, Hell isn't available, which is like the premise of the entire movie. So the Z Fighters battle Janemba on the Lookout, which is pretty much the opposite of Hell. So, the fuck? And on top of that, you also fight Pikkon in the Earth's World Tournament instead of the other world. Which, I mean, I get how adding all these stages could be troublesome. The game can only be so big, and they do cover a lot of ground here. But if you're going to try and tell the entirety of the story in such depth like this, you gotta at least add HFIL, man. Come on. And don't get me started on that damn ruined city. Now I know cities be getting ruined pretty frequently in DBZ, but damn, they use that same stage over and over and over again anytime a fight takes place with a building in a 100-mile radius. I got so sick of seeing that stage, bro. And again, these are just some of many examples I could give you, but trust me, it gets really tedious and seems completely unnecessary at times. Although I will say it put a smile on my face to see them giving almost all of the OG movies and GT such good attention. So much so that the roster is massively improved upon since the original game, and not only in terms of numbers. For starters, the combat here is much more complex. Everything from basic melee attacks to supers receive a massive upgrade, and the supers actually feel relative to the characters and their transformations. Although I gotta say, having a full GT story and not having GT Goku and GT Vegeta felt pretty weird. I couldn't find a better place to throw that in, but anyway, back to the positives. The cast actually have more diverse moves now. In contrast to Tenkaichi 1, the rush melees are different between most characters, and even the ones who have that basic high-speed rush typically still have their own little twist on it. And an even bigger plus, they don't have that stupid background going on, which makes it look so much more clean in comparison. Also, you're able to tag in a member of your team at many times during the story, applying to situations where many of the Z fighters took on an enemy at one time. This is so much more efficient than having each of the fighters take on the enemies one at a time like the OG Tenkaichi did. And also helps the story flow way better. And damn, we need that because this game is already long enough. Your entire party will also gain experience points upon completion of a fight, which I've found to be really cool. The teleporting, vanishes, and combo chains are so fluid. They feel seamless. And again, the supers look so much more clean too. Almost like this is the real Tenkaichi 1 and the actual Tenkaichi 1 was like a test version or something. Ultimate attacks can also completely alter the landscape, giving you a destroyed version of Earth or Namek, which looks so damn sick. Especially the brief cutscene of the exploding planet upon impact. Speaking of the cutscenes, we've got some positives and negatives here. The negatives being well, there certainly aren't many cutscenes at all. Most of the time, the dialogue between battles is text with some voiceovers, which drags on and on and on. And I only found this slightly intriguing during the what if battles because, well, I hadn't seen them before, or at least in like 19 years, so it was actually cool to experience that story. The positives, well, the few cutscenes they actually do have, which again are very infrequent and kind of random. Like you'd expect there to be some for some certain battles, and there's just not. But I digress. The ones that do exist are pretty well made for their era and lengthy as well, covering some cool ass fight scenes that actually captured my attention and intrigue, like that badass Goku vs Vegeta scene at the end of the Saiyan arc. Also, the cutscene for the defeat of Kid Buu gave me chills. Like for some reason, this style is almost better than those super high quality fancy ones. Nothing tops the OG Tenkaichi intro though, I'll give it that. Once you finally complete Dragon Adventure, if you're as patient as I am, you'll have a vast majority of the characters unlocked, as well as skills and Z-item fusions, which make a return in this game as well, allowing you to unlock quote-unquote secret characters, and upgrade some Z-items as well. Again, another returning element is Ultimate Battle, which has evolved from being a fight your way to the top out of 100 enemies, to fight your way to the top out of 7 or 8 or 5 enemies. In all seriousness, it does feel a bit more organized this way, separating each of the Ultimate Battles into separate scenarios, like Kakarot Road, which is actually based on the main antagonists Goku goes up against, in order, starting with the OG Dragon Ball Yamcha fight, through the final showdown with Kid Buu, even featuring a secret battle against Oob upon completion. Once beating Kakarot Road, you'll unlock other courses like the Ginyu Force course, which entails you going up against all of the Force's members at once, kind of like that one stage in Sparking Zero. If you know, you know. And similar to the previous Ultimate Battle, you will gain points as you progress, and each of the succeeding opponents will become more of a challenge. You'll also gain additional points based on highly specific criteria as well. I will say, while this mode does feel a bit more organized, I do prefer the OG Ultimate Battle a bit more. The concept of fighting your way to the top out of 100 players just feels so much more interesting and fun to me. Next, of course, my all-time favorite mode, the World Tournament, returns. Again, I won't say too much about this. You can check my previous Budokai and Tenkaichi videos for all that. But it returns in similar fashion to the previous entries. This time around, the tournament is separated into 3 categories, and numerous difficulties, leading to you winning Zenny upon the completion of each. Beyond that, you can also, of course, utilize dueling and training modes, dueling allowing you to access all the stages in the game. But before we do wrap this up, let's break it down and discuss our overall opinion on Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2. Now, upon beginning this entry, I figured I'd enjoy it more than the OG Tenkaichi, but I had no idea just how much. That's because the combat is drastically updated, to the point where it makes the original Budokai Tenkaichi look more like a test demo than the first entry in a trilogy. The supers and the ultimates are more akin to the characters they represent as well. And the rush attacks, differentiations in the combos make it feel so much more diverse and complete of a game as well. The story mode being extremely lengthy does take some patience to get through. Trust me, it's not easy, especially doing it all at once. And that's because the fights are repetitious as hell. Stages are kind of lacking in some departments given what they're trying to cover, and if you're playing on advanced difficulty like I attempted to for some of the content, you're in for a ride. I'll just be the first to tell you that. Again, it is really cool that they went this in depth with all the minor and major fights in the series, more so than just about any Dragon Ball game that I've ever had the pleasure of experiencing. It's just quite a remarkable feat in general, and if you're going to fit all this content into one game, I mean, it's really difficult to do, and they did an okay job at it. We gotta give them that. And I forgot to mention earlier in the video that if you collect all the Dragon Balls on Namek, you summon Purunga, and you get 3 wishes instead of 1, which is cracked, bro. Definitely just fly to Namek, or just choose a Namek stage once you fucking collect. Just choose a Namek stage once you collect all 7 Dragon Balls, and that's just, if you're trying to collect all the Z-items, bro, that's the way to go. Very canon accurate. All in all, even with the game's flaws that it does have, this is definitely definitely one that you don't want to miss, and absolutely one of my favorite Dragon Ball Z games of all time. I'm not just saying that, it's actually so good. Trust me, it's definitely worth the replay if you hadn't picked it up in a while like myself. Also, I gotta say, in some aspects, and don't roast me for this guys, everyone's entitled to their opinion. In some aspects, not all, in some aspects, Tenkaichi 2 is better than Tenkaichi 3, and maybe one of the best Dragon Ball games to ever hit the market. For that reason, I'm giving Budokai Tenkaichi 2 a 9 out of 10, which is super high for my rankings. It really is that solid of an entry in the franchise. Alright guys, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this far into the video. If you are still here, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and if you have the time, drop a little comment below and tell me what you thought of my video. Did you agree with my comments? Did you dislike my takes? Am I completely absurd for thinking this game is better than Tenkaichi 3 in some ways? And as always guys, I'll see you in the next video. Hopefully it's not as far stretched out between times as the last one, but if it is, fuck, my bad dude. Peace.
Phew. It's over. You took long.